The pilot collapsed at 30,000 feet. Storm ahead, no way around. First officer too inexperienced to land alone. 247 passengers about to die. Then a woman stood up screaming she flew fighter jets. But passengers recognized her face from news, the disgraced pilot, the traitor. Now she must save the people who hate her most. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. Captain Michael Rodriguez had been flying for Delta Airlines for 23 years without a single incident. None of that mattered when the massive stroke hit him at exactly 3:47 p.m., 30,000 feet above the Colorado Rockies. The pain in his chest became crushing pressure. His vision blurred, then darkened. The controls of Delta Flight 1847 suddenly felt impossibly heavy in his hands. Chen, he managed to say before his entire body went rigid. First Officer David Chen, 26 years old and 8 months into his career, looked over just in time to see his captain's eyes roll back. Rodriguez slumped forward over the yoke, his full weight pushing the control column down. The Boeing 737 pitched forward violently. "Captain!" Chen grabbed Rodriguez's shoulder and pulled him back. The man was completely limp. "Captain Rodriguez, can you hear me?" Nothing. No response. The captain's face had gone gray. His mouth hung open. Chen's hands were shaking as he activated the intercom. His voice cracked with panic that he tried desperately to hide. "This is First Officer Chen. We have a medical emergency in the cockpit. I need a doctor to the flight deck immediately. Is there a doctor on board this aircraft?" Through the secure cockpit door, he could hear immediate movement in the cabin. Footsteps. Worried voices. The change in tone when people realize something is seriously wrong. Chen looked at the radar screen. His stomach dropped. A massive wall of red and yellow stretched across their flight path. The storm system had intensified dramatically. There was no way around it. Going north would add 2 hours they didn't have fuel for. Going south meant mountains in severe turbulence. They had to go through it. The autopilot alarm started blaring, a harsh electronic sound that made Chen's heart race even faster. He'd been so focused on Rodriguez that he hadn't noticed the turbulence beginning. The aircraft shook, gently at first, then more violently. Warning lights flickered on the overhead panel like a Christmas tree. The master caution light illuminated in amber. "Autopilot disconnect," the automated voice announced in that calm, emotionless tone that seemed completely inappropriate for the situation. Chen grabbed the controls. His palms were sweating. He'd only been a first officer for 8 months. He'd never flown through weather like this alone. Never landed without a captain. Never dealt with an unconscious pilot while 247 passengers depended on him. "Mayday, mayday, mayday," he said into his headset, his voice higher than normal. "Denver Center, Delta 1847, Captain is incapacitated, requesting immediate assistance and priority routing to nearest suitable airport." Delta 1847, Denver Center, roger your mayday. "We copy, Captain is incapacitated." "What is the nature of the incapacitation? Can you provide more details?" "Appears to be cardiac arrest or stroke. He's unconscious, not responding to verbal stimuli, breathing is shallow and irregular. I'm a low-time first officer with 8 months experience. I have a major storm system on radar directly ahead of my position and I cannot safely fly through it alone in this weather." Delta 1847, understood. Stand by for routing options. Medical emergency is also noted. Paramedics will be standing by at your destination. In the cabin, Senior Flight Attendant Maria Santos was already moving toward the cockpit with purpose. She'd heard the barely controlled panic in Chen's voice, heard the specific words he'd chosen. 23 years of flying commercial airlines had taught her to recognize the difference between a minor issue and a genuine emergency. This was the latter. She knocked on the reinforced cockpit door 3 times, hard. "It's Maria. I'm coming in. Opening the door now." Chen reached over and unlocked it without taking his eyes off the instruments. The door swung open. Maria stepped into the cockpit and immediately assessed the situation with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen just about everything in 2 decades of flying. She saw Rodriguez slumped in his seat, unconscious, his breathing labored and shallow. She saw Chen's white-knuckled grip on the controls, saw the fear in his young face. She saw the radar screen showing nothing but severe weather ahead. "Get him out of the seat," Chen said, his voice tight. "I need to focus on flying. I can't help him and fly at the same time." "Already on it." Maria turned and called back into the cabin, her voice carrying the authority of someone who expected to be obeyed immediately. "Jennifer, Rachel, I need you both up here right now. Medical emergency." 2 more flight attendants rushed forward through the first-class cabin, past passengers who were starting to realize something was very wrong. Together, the 3 women struggled to pull Rodriguez's unconscious body from the captain's seat. He was a big man, over 200 pounds, and his deadweight made it nearly impossible. They had to unbuckle his 4-point harness, disconnect his headset, and physically lift him out of the seat while the aircraft was already starting to shake from turbulence. It took them almost 3 minutes of hard work. They finally got him into the small space behind the cockpit seats and laid him flat on the floor. It wasn't much space, maybe 4 feet by 6 feet, but it was all they had. Maria immediately started chest compressions, counting under her breath. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. "Is there a doctor on board?" she shouted toward the cabin. "Medical professional? Anyone with medical training?" "I'm a nurse," a woman called from seat 3B in first class. "Let me through." The nurse, a woman named Patricia Chen, no relation to David, maybe 50 years old with gray hair and kind eyes, pushed past frightened passengers and squeezed into the cramped cockpit space. She took over chest compressions while Maria grabbed the emergency medical kit from its mount on the wall. Inside were basic supplies, oxygen mask, AED defibrillator, blood pressure cuff, medications. "How long has he been unconscious?" Patricia asked, maintaining steady compressions. "About 4 minutes, Maria said, checking her watch. "That's not good. Brain damage starts at 6 minutes without oxygen." They hooked up the portable AED. The electronic voice said, analyzing heart rhythm. "Do not touch the patient." They waited. 5 seconds that felt like an hour. "No shock advised. Continue CPR." Patricia continued compressions while Maria squeezed the oxygen bag mask over Rodriguez's face, trying to force air into his lungs. Chen was alone now at the controls, hand flying through increasingly rough air. The storm was getting closer with every passing second. The radar showed solid red directly ahead, maybe 50 miles away. At their current speed of 450 knots, they had less than 7 minutes before they hit it. "I can't do this," he whispered to himself, not meaning for anyone to hear. "I can't do this alone. I'm not ready for this." The aircraft lurched violently to the left. Chen corrected, overcorrected, then corrected again. His movements were jerky, uncertain. A passenger's laptop flew down the aisle, crashing into a seat. People screamed. The seatbelt sign had been on for the last 20 minutes, but people were still being thrown around in their seats. "Everyone stay in your seats with your seatbelts fastened." Maria yelled from the cockpit doorway, her voice carrying through the cabin. The cockpit door wouldn't close properly now. The lock mechanism had jammed when they'd pulled Rodriguez out, and nobody had time to fix it. In seat 12C, Kate Sullivan had her eyes closed and her hands gripping the armrests. She'd been trying to sleep for the last hour, trying not to think about tomorrow. Trying not to think about her sister Sarah's funeral. Trying not to think about the fact that Sarah had died 3 days ago, still believing Kate was a traitor and a disgrace to the family. They hadn't spoken in 3 months. Their last conversation had been a screaming match over the phone, Sarah calling her a coward and a traitor, Kate trying to explain that she'd done the right thing, Sarah hanging up on her. Now Sarah was dead from a sudden brain aneurysm, and they would never reconcile. That guilt sat in Kate's chest like a physical weight. But she couldn't ignore the panic in the cabin anymore. She opened her eyes and saw people crying, praying, holding hands with strangers. She heard Chen's voice over the intercom, strained and terrified, trying to sound calm and failing. "Folks, this is First Officer Chen speaking from the cockpit. We have a medical emergency with our captain. I want to assure you that I am fully qualified to fly this aircraft. However, we do have some significant weather ahead. I'm going to need everyone to remain calm, stay seated, and keep your seatbelts fastened. We're going to get through this together." Kate had heard that tone before. She'd heard it in combat zones from young pilots who were in over their heads and knew it. That was the voice of someone who wasn't sure they'd survive the next hour but was trying to project confidence anyway. She looked out the window. The clouds ahead weren't just dark, they were black with a greenish tint. She could see rotation in the cloud structures even from 30,000 feet. That wasn't just a thunderstorm. That was a supercell. That was the kind of storm system that spawned tornadoes and tore aircraft apart with wind shear and hail. "Jesus Christ," the businessman next to her in 12D muttered, looking at the same clouds. "I can't believe this is happening." The pilot passed out. "What the hell are we supposed to do? We're all going to die." Kate said nothing. She stared at the clouds and calculated. Single first officer, clearly inexperienced based on his voice and his word choices. Major supercell storm directly ahead, no way around it. Captain down, probably dead or dying. This was very bad. This was potentially catastrophic. Another violent shake rattled the entire aircraft. The overhead bins popped open. Bags fell out. The oxygen masks suddenly dropped from the ceiling panels with a loud bang. Passengers screamed louder. Parents grabbed their children. People were crying openly now. Kate's combat pilot training kicked in automatically, like muscle memory. She assessed the situation with the cold analytical mind that had kept her alive through 127 combat missions in the Middle East. She ran through scenarios in her head. Single pilot, inexperienced, severe weather, no help available. The probability of a successful outcome was low. Very low. But not zero. Chen's voice came through the intercom again, and this time he wasn't even trying to hide his fear. "I need help. Is there anyone on this aircraft with flight experience? Anyone who's flown aircraft before? Commercial, military, private pilots? I cannot do this alone. Please, if anyone has flight experience, I need you to identify yourself to the flight attendants immediately." Kate felt her heart pounding in her chest like a drum. She could help. She knew she could help. She had over 3,000 hours in F-16 fighting Falcons. She'd flown through situations far worse than this. She'd landed fighters in sandstorms with zero visibility. She'd navigated through anti-aircraft fire and surface-to-air missiles. She'd brought damaged aircraft home on one engine with hydraulic systems failing. She'd trained for every possible emergency scenario. But if she identified herself, everyone would know who she was. The passengers would recognize her name. They'd remember the news stories from 3 months ago. Disgraced pilot refuses orders. Major Sullivan endangers American troops. Traitor pilot discharged from military. Sullivan's refusal to follow orders put soldiers at risk. They'd remember the lies the military public relations machine had spread. They wouldn't know the truth. They wouldn't know that she'd refused to fire missiles at a civilian refugee convoy. They wouldn't know that the enemy combatants she'd been ordered to kill were actually women and children fleeing from a war zone. They wouldn't know that she'd gone up the chain of command, filed official complaints, finally testified before a congressional oversight committee about systematic war crimes being committed. They would just see her as the bad guy. The pilot who disobeyed orders in combat. The traitor. She could stay quiet. Someone else might help. Maybe there was another pilot on board. Probably not, but maybe. Another massive jolt shook the aircraft. A child somewhere behind her screamed in terror. Kate looked up and saw the flight attendant at the front of the cabin struggling to stay on her feet, grabbing seatbacks for support. Please, Chen's voice came through again, and now he was openly begging. I need someone. Anyone. I can't fly through this storm alone. Please help me. Kate unbuckled her seatbelt. Her hands moved automatically, like they had minds of their own. She stood up. The businessman next to her grabbed her arm. Ma'am, you need to stay seated. Didn't you hear the announcement? Kate pulled her arm away firmly but not roughly. Her voice came out stronger and more confident than she felt. I flew F-16s. Let me in that cockpit. The entire cabin went completely silent. It was like someone had hit a mute button on reality. 247 pairs of eyes turned to look at her. The only sound was the roar of the engines and the howl of wind outside the aircraft. The flight attendant near the front, Jennifer, a young woman maybe 25 years old, rushed down the aisle toward her. Ma'am, you need to sit down. I'm a fighter pilot, Kate said loudly enough for everyone to hear. 12 years active duty. F-16 Fighting Falcons. 3,000 hours. Combat veteran. I can help him. Jennifer stopped in her tracks. You're serious? You're actually a pilot? Major Kate Sullivan, United States Air Force. She paused, then added, formerly. You can really fly this plane? I can help fly it. Get me to that cockpit. Now. Jennifer looked at her for exactly 2 seconds, making a split-second decision that could either save everyone's life or make a bad situation worse. Then she nodded sharply. Follow me. Quickly. Kate stepped into the aisle and started walking forward. People stared at her like she was either their savior or their doom. Some looked hopeful. Others looked terrified that their only help was coming from a random passenger who claimed to be a pilot. She'd made it about 6 rows when the businessman from 12D called out behind her. She heard him clearly over the ambient noise. Wait. Wait just a minute. His voice was shocked, almost horrified. I know you. You're Major Kate Sullivan. You're that pilot from the news 3 months ago. The one who was dishonorably discharged. Kate stopped walking. Here it comes, she thought. Here comes the recognition. Here comes the judgment. She turned slowly to face him. The man was on his feet now, holding his phone, looking between her and his screen like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. You refused orders in combat, he continued, his voice getting louder as other passengers started paying attention. You were dishonorably discharged for disobeying direct commands from your superior officers. You endangered American soldiers. I read about you. You're a traitor to your country. Murmurs spread through the cabin like wildfire. More phones came out. People were frantically Googling her name, pulling up news articles, reading headlines out loud. Major Kate Sullivan dishonorably discharged. Sullivan refused orders, endangered troops. Disgraced fighter pilot betrays military. That's her, someone said from the back of the cabin. I remember the story. It was all over the news. She disobeyed orders during combat operations. She was supposed to strike an enemy target and she refused. The military said she put American lives at risk. Kate's jaw tightened. She felt the familiar surge of anger and shame that came every time someone recognized her, every time she had to relive this. But she kept her voice level and calm. Yes, she said clearly. I'm Major Kate Sullivan. I was dishonorably discharged from the United States Air Force 3 months ago. And right now, I am your only chance to survive the next hour. So you can either let me help fly this aircraft through that storm, or you can sit here and wait to crash into a mountain. Your choice. She didn't wait for an answer. She turned and continued walking toward the cockpit, her back straight, her head up. Jennifer fell into step beside her. Is what they said true? Jennifer asked quietly. About the discharge? Parts of it, Kate said. The important parts are more complicated than a news headline. They reached the cockpit. Jennifer knocked and called out. Maria, we have someone who says she can help. The door was already partially open because of the jammed lock. Kate stepped into the cockpit and immediately assessed the situation with her pilot's eye. Captain Rodriguez on the floor, the nurse still doing chest compressions but looking exhausted. First Officer Chen at the controls, white-knuckled, sweat dripping down his face despite the cool air. The radar screen showing massive storm cells directly ahead, maybe 3 minutes away now. Warning lights illuminated across the panel. The artificial horizon showing the aircraft in a slight bank to the right. Airspeed dropping below optimal. Altitude decreasing. Chen glanced back and his eyes went wide with recognition. You're Major Sullivan. Of course he knew too. Of course he did. That's me, Kate said, moving forward into the cockpit space. You're the one who refused orders in combat. Who was dishonorably discharged for betraying. Kate cut him off, her voice sharp and commanding. Your captain is dead or dying. You're flying into the worst storm I've seen on that radar screen. And you need help. So you can either spend the next 5 minutes questioning my honor and then die, or you can accept my assistance and possibly live. What's it going to be, First Officer? Chen stared at her. The aircraft shook violently. A loud crack echoed through the cockpit as hail struck the windscreen, leaving a spiderweb pattern of cracks in the outer layer of glass. I don't need help from someone who betrayed their country, Chen said, but his voice shook and his hands were trembling on the controls. I didn't betray anyone, Kate said, stepping closer. I refuse to murder civilians. I refuse to fire missiles at women and children. That's why I was discharged. Because I wouldn't commit war crimes. Now do you want to die trying to prove some point about my honor, or do you want to live by letting me help you fly this aircraft? Another massive jolt threw Kate against the center console. Chen let out a small cry of fear as the aircraft dropped what felt like 100 feet in 1 second. The stall warning horn started blaring. Pitch down. Kate shouted. You're too slow, you're about to stall. Chen pushed forward on the yoke instinctively. The nose dropped. The stall warning stopped. Chen looked at her, then at the storm on the radar, then at his own shaking hands. He was out of his depth and he knew it. Pride and prejudice versus survival. It wasn't really a choice. Fine, he said finally. But I'm still pilot in command. This is my aircraft. I'm responsible for it. Agreed 100%, Kate said immediately. You're pilot in command. I'm just here to advise and assist. You fly, I'll guide. You make all final decisions. I'm just another set of eyes and hands. Chen nodded, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. Okay. Okay. What do I do? Kate slid into the captain's seat, which was still warm from Rodriguez's body. The controls felt different from an F-16 stick, but the basics were universal. Yoke instead of stick, throttle levers instead of a single throttle. But the fundamental principles were the same. Pitch, power, bank, yaw. First things first, Kate said, her voice calm and professional now. Tell me your experience level. How many hours do you have total? 500 hours. 8 months as first officer with Delta. Kate's heart sank. That was almost nothing. But she kept her face completely neutral. That's fine. You've got this. You've been trained for this. First thing, how's our fuel state? Chen checked the gauge. 45 minutes at current consumption rate. And what's the nearest airport that's not in the middle of this storm system? Salt Lake City. But we'd have to divert significantly around the storm to the south, and with the headwinds we're facing we don't have enough fuel. We'd run out about 60 miles short. What about Denver? We could turn back. Denver just closed. They're getting the worst of the storm. Wind shear alerts, microburst activity, visibility near zero. So Seattle is our only real option. Yes ma'am. But Seattle is currently reporting visibility of 1/8 mile, ceiling at 200 feet, heavy rain. That's right at Category 3 minimums. I've only done Category 3 approaches twice, both in the simulator, and I didn't do well on either one. Kate looked at the radar display. The storm system stretched for over 200 miles from north to south. There was no way around it without adding 3 hours to their flight time, which they didn't have fuel for. There was no way over it. The tops were at 50,000 feet and they were in a 737 that couldn't get above 41,000 feet, and even that would require dumping weight they didn't have time to dump. They couldn't go under it because that meant descending into mountainous terrain in severe turbulence with zero margin for error. They had to go through it. There was no other option. All right, Kate said, forcing confidence into her voice that she didn't entirely feel. Here's what we're going to do. You're going to hand-fly this aircraft through the storm. Don't use autopilot. The autopilot can't handle turbulence this severe. It'll fight every bump and shake the aircraft apart. I can't hand-fly in severe turbulence, Chen protested. I'm not trained for that. I've never done it. You're going to learn right now. I'm going to talk you through every single second. You're not alone. I'll be right here beside you. Kate started adjusting settings, setting up the instruments the way she liked them. Keep your hands light on the controls. Don't grip too tight. You want to feel the aircraft, not fight it. Don't try to fight the turbulence. You'll never win. Ride with it. Small corrections. Tiny adjustments. The aircraft wants to fly. Let it fly. The first burst of hail hit the windscreen like machine gun fire. More cracks appeared in the glass, spreading like frost across a window. The sound was deafening. Oh God, Chen whispered. Oh God, we're going to die. We're not going to die, Kate said firmly. Eyes on the instruments, not the windscreen. I don't care if that windscreen shatters completely. We don't need to see outside. Altitude, airspeed, heading, vertical speed. Those 4 instruments will get us through this. Everything else is just noise. You've really done this before. I've flown F-16s through anti-aircraft fire at night in a sandstorm with one engine out and my wingman dead, Kate said. The memory flashed through her mind, tracers lighting up the night sky, warning alarms blaring, her friend's voice cutting off mid-sentence as his aircraft exploded. She pushed the memory away. This storm is nothing compared to that. Trust me. Kate didn't feel as confident as she sounded. But Chen needed to believe she knew what she was doing. Fear was contagious. But so was confidence. Right now, she needed to project absolute confidence even if she didn't feel it. They hit the edge of the storm cell like hitting a brick wall at highway speed. The aircraft jolted so violently that Kate's head slammed into the ceiling despite her seatbelt. Pain exploded across her skull. She saw stars. Chen screamed. The control yoke jerked hard to the left in his hands. Don't overcorrect. Kate shouted over the roar of wind and hail. Light touch. Small movements. Let the aircraft move. We're just along for the ride. Lightning flashed so close that Kate's vision went white. She couldn't see anything for 3 seconds. Thunder boomed so loud it felt like the aircraft was being torn apart. Every warning alarm on the panel started blaring at once. Master caution, master warning, overspeed, stall warning, altitude alert, terrain warning. The aircraft pitched up sharply, nose pointing almost 30 degrees above level. Chen instinctively pulled back on the yoke, trying to level it out. Don't fight it. Kate grabbed his arm. Let it pitch. It'll settle back down on its own. If you fight every movement you're going to tear the wings off. Chen forced himself to relax his grip. The aircraft pitched back down, overcorrected, pitched down too far, then slowly settled back to something approaching level flight. Good, Kate said. That's good. You're doing great. You're a natural. I'm terrified, Chen admitted. Terror is fine. Terror keeps you alert. Just don't let it paralyze you. Another massive updraft caught them like a giant hand swatting a fly. They shot up from 30,000 feet to 33,000 feet in less than 5 seconds. The vertical speed indicator pegged at 6,000 feet per minute climb rate. Kate's stomach dropped as her body pressed down into the seat from the G-forces. The stall warning started blaring again. Pitch down. Kate commanded. Push forward. We're climbing too fast, we're going to stall. Chen shoved the yoke forward. The nose dropped sharply. They went from climbing at 6,000 feet per minute to descending at 4,000 feet per minute in 2 seconds. Kate's body lifted against her seatbelt. Loose items in the cockpit floated up toward the ceiling. Level us out at 30,000, Kate said, keeping her voice calm and steady. Gentle pull back. Tiny movements. Chen pulled back gradually. The aircraft leveled out, more or less. They were actually at 31,000 feet and descending slowly, but that was close enough. Perfect. You're doing perfect. See? You've got this. Behind them, Kate could hear chaos from the cabin. Screaming. Crying. Things crashing. The flight attendants shouting for people to stay in their seats. She tuned it out. Nothing mattered right now except keeping this aircraft in the air. But then she heard a specific voice, loud and angry, cutting through the other noise. That's Major Sullivan in the cockpit. The traitor pilot. Kate's shoulders tensed. She didn't turn around. Get her out of there, another voice yelled. She can't be trusted. She betrayed her country, a third voice added. She shouldn't be anywhere near the controls. Several passengers had appeared at the cockpit door, looking in through the damaged entrance. A man in his 40s, wearing a business suit, red-faced and angry, pushed forward. Get her out of that seat, he demanded. She's the pilot who disobeyed orders in combat. She was dishonorably discharged. She betrayed American soldiers. We don't want a traitor flying this aircraft. Chen glanced back, distracted for a crucial second. The aircraft dipped to the right. He overcorrected left. Eyes forward. Kate snapped at him. Then she turned her head slightly to address the passengers without taking her hands off the controls. I understand you don't trust me. I get it. The news stories made me look like a traitor. But right now, in this moment, I am keeping this aircraft and everyone on it alive. We can discuss my honor and my reputation after we land. Deal? No deal, the businessman said. I read about you. You refused to follow direct orders from your commanding officers. You endangered American soldiers in a combat zone. You were charged with dereliction of duty and insubordination. You're lucky they didn't court-martial you. Kate felt the familiar anger rising in her chest. The same anger she'd felt every time someone who didn't know the full story judged her. But she forced it down. This wasn't the time. I refused to fire missiles at a refugee convoy full of women and children, Kate said, her voice cold and controlled. I refused to commit murder. That's why I was discharged. Because I wouldn't kill innocent civilians. That's not what the military said. The military lied. Kate's voice cut like a knife. They lied because admitting the truth would mean admitting they ordered war crimes. And right now, none of that matters. None of it. Because if First Officer Chen and I don't work together to fly through this storm, we're all going to die. Every single person on this aircraft. You, me, him, everyone. So you have a choice. You can either sit down, shut up, and let me work, or you can stand there arguing about my honor while we crash into a mountain. What's it going to be? The businessman opened his mouth to argue more, but Maria Santos stepped between him and the cockpit. Everyone back to your seats now, she said, her voice hard as iron. That's not a request. That's an order. If you don't comply immediately, I will have you physically restrained for the safety of this flight. I want her removed from the cockpit. And I want to land this aircraft with everyone alive, Maria shot back. So sit down before I make you sit down. The man hesitated. Maria took a step toward him. He backed away, then turned and stumbled back to his seat. But Kate could still hear the murmurs throughout the cabin. The doubt. The fear. The anger. People were scared, and scared people looked for someone to blame. Right now, she was an easy target. Chen spoke quietly, not taking his eyes off the instruments. For what it's worth, you're flying better than I could ever hope to. We need you here. Kate felt a small warmth in her chest. One person believing in her. In this moment, that was enough. Thank you. Now let's focus on staying alive. The storm raged around them for another 35 minutes. 35 minutes that felt like 35 hours. 35 minutes of absolute hell. Lightning struck the aircraft twice more, leaving scorch marks on the aluminum fuselage and temporarily blinding everyone in the cockpit. The hail cracked 2 passenger windows in the main cabin, requiring the flight attendants to seal them with emergency tape while the aircraft bucked and shook. The turbulence threw people against their seatbelts hard enough to leave bruises. One passenger broke his wrist when he reached up to adjust the air vent and the aircraft dropped suddenly. Several people vomited from motion sickness. A flight attendant got a concussion when she was thrown into the ceiling despite holding onto the seatbacks. Through all of it, Kate talked Chen through every moment. When the aircraft pitched up violently, she told him exactly how much to push forward. When they hit a downdraft that sent them falling like a stone, she guided his hands on the throttles, adding power at precisely the right moment. When the airspeed indicator showed them approaching the maximum operating speed of the aircraft, she walked him through the process of deploying speed brakes and reducing power. Chen was learning fast, following her instructions exactly, trusting her completely. His hands were steadier now. His voice was calmer. He was finding his confidence. You're a natural at this, Kate told him during a brief moment of relatively calm air. You've got good instincts. I'm just doing what you tell me. No, you're doing more than that. You're feeling the aircraft. You're anticipating. That's not something that can be taught. You either have it or you don't. You have it. Chen actually smiled slightly despite the circumstances. My captain is going to be so proud when I tell him about this. Kate glanced at Rodriguez's body on the floor behind them. The nurse had stopped CPR 10 minutes ago. There was no point. The man was gone. Yeah, Kate said softly. He will be. Finally, mercifully, they broke through the back side of the storm system. The aircraft emerged into clear air. Weak late afternoon sunlight broke through scattered clouds. The ride smoothed out immediately. The constant shaking stopped. The warning alarms fell silent. Chen let out a sob of relief. We made it. Oh my God, we actually made it through. We're not done yet, Kate reminded him. Now we have to land. She pulled up the approach plates for Seattle-Tacoma International Airport on the display screen. Her heart sank as she read the current weather report. Seattle is reporting visibility of 1/8 statute mile in heavy rain. Ceiling 200 feet. Wind 320 at 18 gusting to 31. That's Category 3A minimums. Have you ever done a Category 3 approach outside of a simulator? No, Chen admitted. Never. In the simulator I crashed the first time and barely made it the second time. Kate looked at him seriously. Can you do this? Chen was quiet for a long moment. Kate saw him wrestling with his pride, his ego, his desire to prove himself. She saw the moment he made the honest assessment. No, he said quietly. I can't. Not in these conditions. I don't have the experience. I'll crash us. I'll kill everyone. Kate respected his honesty. A lot of pilots would have tried anyway, let ego override judgment. That kind of thinking killed people. Okay, Kate said. Then I'll fly the approach and landing. You can't. You're not typed in this aircraft. You don't have a current pilot's license. You're not even legally allowed to fly anymore. If you fly this aircraft and we survive, you'll be arrested. You violated the terms of your discharge. You're not permitted to operate any aircraft, civilian or military, under any circumstances. I know. You'll go to federal prison. 5 years minimum. I know. Then why would you? Because it's the right thing to do, Kate said simply, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. There are 247 people on this aircraft. I can save them. So I will. What happens to me afterward doesn't matter. Getting them home safely is all that matters. Chen stared at her for a long moment. Kate saw respect in his eyes, saw him reassessing everything he'd thought about her. You're not what they said you were. The news stories. They were wrong about you. Maybe. Or maybe I'm exactly what they said and I'm just trying to make up for it. Either way, we need to land this plane. Chen nodded slowly. Okay. You have the controls. Kate's hands closed around the yoke. It felt right. It felt like coming home. Even if it cost her everything, even if she spent the next 5 years in a federal prison cell, this was what she was meant to do. I have the controls, she confirmed. You have the controls, Chen repeated, completing the formal transfer. Kate contacted Seattle Approach Control. Seattle Approach, Delta 1847, requesting priority handling for approach and landing. We have an incapacitated captain, emergency situation on board. Delta 1847, Seattle Approach, Roger. You're cleared for immediate ILS approach runway 16 left. All other traffic has been cleared. Emergency equipment is standing by. Roger, cleared for ILS 16 left. Delta 1847. Kate began the descent, running through the approach checklist with Chen. Despite the situation, despite everything, she found herself falling into the familiar rhythm of preparation. Chair flying in her mind, visualizing every step. Altimeters, she called. Checked and set, Chen responded. Gear down. Chen moved the gear lever. 3 green lights illuminated. Gear down, 3 green. Flaps 10. Flaps 10. They descended through 15,000 feet, then 10,000, then 5,000. Kate kept the aircraft perfectly on the glide slope and localizer, the needle centered on her instruments. In the cabin behind them, several passengers were watching through the damaged cockpit door. One of them was recording everything on his phone. Kate knew this would be all over social media within hours. Viral video of the disgraced pilot flying the commercial jet. The FBI would see it. The military would see it. There would be no hiding from this. She pushed those thoughts away. Focus. One thing at a time. At 3,000 feet, they entered the clouds. Visibility dropped to 0. Kate's world narrowed to the instruments in front of her. Altitude, airspeed, glide slope, localizer, vertical speed. Everything else disappeared. 2,000 feet, Chen called out. Roger. 1,000 feet. The aircraft shook from turbulence as they descended through the weather. Rain hammered the windscreen. Kate couldn't see anything outside except gray mist. 500 feet. Still in the clouds. Still zero visibility. 400 feet. Kate's hands were rock steady on the controls despite her heart pounding. 300 feet. 200 feet. This was decision height. If they didn't have visual contact with the runway by 200 feet, regulations said they had to execute a missed approach and go around. But they were at minimum fuel. They couldn't go around. This was their one shot. 150 feet. Still no visual, Chen said. Kate kept the descent going. Technically illegal. But necessary. 100 feet. And then, suddenly, like a curtain being pulled back, the runway lights appeared through the rain and mist. Faint, barely visible, but there. Runway in sight, Kate said calmly. She made a final adjustment, lining up perfectly with the centerline. The aircraft settled toward the wet pavement. 50 feet. 40. 30. 20. 10. The main wheels touched down with a solid thump. Not the smoothest landing Kate had ever done, but firm and controlled. Chen immediately deployed the thrust reversers and the aircraft slowed rapidly. Kate applied the brakes, feeling the anti-skid system pulse under her feet on the wet runway. They slowed to taxi speed. The aircraft was down. Everyone was safe. For a moment, there was complete silence in the cockpit. Then Chen started laughing, almost hysterical with relief. We did it. Holy shit, we actually did it. Kate allowed herself a small smile. We did. The cabin behind them erupted in cheers and applause. People were crying, hugging strangers, thanking God. Kate taxied the aircraft off the runway and followed ground control's instructions to a remote parking area away from the terminal. Emergency vehicles surrounded them immediately, fire trucks, ambulances, police cars. Ladies and gentlemen, Kate said over the intercom, welcome to Seattle. I apologize for the rough ride. Please remain seated until the aircraft comes to a complete stop and the emergency crews have cleared us. As soon as they stopped and Kate set the parking brake, paramedics rushed on board to help Rodriguez. But Kate already knew it was too late. The man had been dead for over an hour. Airport operations came next, then airline management, and finally, the FBI. Two men in dark suits walked onto the aircraft before anyone was allowed to deplane. They went straight to the cockpit. One of them was holding handcuffs. Major Kate Sullivan. Kate stood up and faced them. Yes. I'm Special Agent Marcus Wade, FBI. This is Special Agent Jennifer Chen. You're under arrest for violating the terms of your military discharge. You're not permitted to operate any aircraft, military or civilian, under any circumstances. You have the right to remain silent. She saved us, a passenger shouted from the cabin. You can't arrest her. She's a hero, another voice called. Without her we'd all be dead. Agent Wade didn't stop reading Kate her rights. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. First Officer Chen stepped between them. Wait. You can't arrest her. She saved 247 people. Captain Rodriguez was incapacitated. I didn't have the skills to land in those conditions. She was the only one who could do it. Sir, step aside, Agent Wade said firmly. Major Sullivan violated federal law. We don't have a choice in this matter. This is wrong, Chen said, his voice breaking. This is completely wrong. Kate touched his shoulder. It's okay. They're just doing their job. I knew this would happen. Agent Wade put the handcuffs on her wrists. Not roughly, but firmly. Professional. As they led her through the cabin, every passenger stood and applauded. Some were crying. The businessman from 12D who'd called her a traitor was standing with tears running down his face. "I'm sorry," he said as she passed. "I'm so sorry I called you a traitor. I was wrong. You saved my life. You saved all of us." Kate just nodded. She couldn't speak. Her throat was too tight. A woman in her 30s stepped into the aisle and hugged Kate despite the handcuffs and the FBI agents trying to move her along. "Thank you," the woman whispered. "Thank you for not giving up on us even when we doubted you." Outside the aircraft, news cameras were already set up. Kate was led across the tarmac to a waiting FBI vehicle while reporters shouted questions. "Major Sullivan, why did you fly the plane when you knew you'd be arrested? Kate, do you regret your decision? Is it true you were dishonorably discharged for refusing orders?" She didn't answer any of them. She just got into the back of the FBI vehicle and watched the passengers deplaning through the window. Alive. Safe. Home. That was all that mattered. They took her to the Seattle FBI field office downtown. Put her in an interrogation room and left her there for 4 hours. Standard procedure: let her sit and think about her situation, let the stress build. Kate used the time to run through everything in her head. She'd violated her discharge terms. That was federal law, clear as day. She'd known the consequences and done it anyway. She had no legal defense. They had her dead to rights. Finally, 2 agents came in. The woman who'd arrested her at the airport, Special Agent Jennifer Chen, and an older man with gray hair. "Major Sullivan," the man said, sitting down across from her. "I'm Special Agent Thomas Rivera, Senior Agent in charge. You're in very serious trouble. I know. You violated the terms of your discharge. The terms were explicit. You are not permitted to operate any aircraft, military or civilian, under any circumstances. Period. No exceptions. I understand. And yet today you flew a Boeing 737 with 247 souls on board." "I did." "Why?" Kate looked at him directly. "Because if I didn't, they would all be dead right now. First Officer Chen is a good pilot, but he didn't have the experience for that situation. Someone had to fly that aircraft. I was the only one who could. That's not a legal defense. I know. But it's the truth." Agent Chen spoke up. "The U.S. Attorney for Western Washington is pushing for maximum charges. 5 years in federal prison. They want to make an example of you." Kate nodded. She'd expected this. However, Agent Rivera continued, "There's a significant complication. Every single passenger on that flight is calling you a hero. Social media is exploding. The footage from inside the cockpit has been viewed over 20 million times in the last 6 hours. There are already petitions online with hundreds of thousands of signatures demanding the charges be dropped." "That doesn't change the law," Kate said. "No, it doesn't. But it changes the political calculus. Prosecutors don't like high-profile cases where public opinion is strongly against them." "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying this is going to be complicated. The U.S. Attorney wants to prosecute. The public wants you pardoned. The military wants you to go away quietly. Delta Airlines wants to give you a medal. It's a mess." They left her alone again. Kate sat in the interrogation room and thought about her sister. Sarah was being buried tomorrow. Kate had come to Seattle for the funeral. Now she'd miss it because she was in FBI custody. Sarah would never know that Kate had saved all those people. Would never know that her sister died a hero, not a traitor. That hurt more than anything else. The next morning, Kate was transferred to federal court for her arraignment. The courtroom was absolutely packed. Every seat filled. Media cameras everywhere. But also passengers from Flight 1847. She recognized dozens of faces from the plane. The federal prosecutor, a stern-looking woman in her 50s named Margaret Richardson, stood up. "Your Honor, the United States requests that Major Sullivan be held without bail pending trial. She has already demonstrated a complete disregard for the law. She violated explicit terms of her military discharge. She showed willful intent to break federal regulations. She poses a flight risk." Kate's public defender, a young woman fresh out of law school named Jennifer Washington, stood up. She looked nervous but determined. "Your Honor, my client saved 247 lives yesterday. The alternative to her actions was letting every single person on that aircraft die. She had no choice. She acted heroically. She had a choice not to fly," Prosecutor Richardson shot back. "She could have refused. The law is clear. And everyone would have died," Jennifer Washington said, her voice getting stronger. First Officer David Chen has already testified in a sworn statement that he did not have the experience or skills to land that aircraft in those weather conditions. Without Major Sullivan's assistance, there would have been 247 deaths. Instead, there were 0. That should count for something. The judge, an older woman with steel-gray hair named Patricia Martinez, looked at Kate with sharp, intelligent eyes. "Major Sullivan, do you have anything to say before I set bail?" Kate stood up slowly. Her public defender had advised her to stay quiet, but she needed to speak. "Your Honor, I knew when I entered that cockpit that I was violating the terms of my discharge. I knew I would be arrested if we survived. I knew I would face federal charges. But I also knew that if I didn't help, everyone on that aircraft would die." First Officer Chen is a good pilot, but he didn't have enough experience for that situation. The captain was unconscious. The storm was severe. The landing was at absolute minimums. Someone had to fly that plane. I was the only person on board with the skills to do it. So I made a choice. I chose to save lives over following a rule. If I had to do it again, I would make the exact same choice. I accept the consequences of that decision." Judge Martinez nodded slowly. "Bail is set at $50,000. Trial date will be set for 8 weeks from now. Major Sullivan, you're released on your own recognizance pending trial." "Your Honor." Prosecutor Richardson objected. "She's a flight risk. She's not going anywhere," Judge Martinez said firmly. Next case. A man stood up in the gallery. The businessman from seat 12D. "Your Honor, I'll pay her bail right now." Another passenger stood. "I'll contribute too." "So will I." Within 2 minutes, 20 passengers had pledged money. More than enough to cover the bail amount. Kate felt tears in her eyes. These people, who'd called her a traitor just yesterday, were now paying her bail. She was released from custody that afternoon. She walked out of the courthouse to find a crowd of over 300 people waiting for her. Passengers, supporters, media. "Kate. Kate. How do you feel about the charges? Kate. Do you regret flying the plane? Kate. The military is calling for maximum prosecution. What do you say to that?" Kate stopped at the top of the courthouse steps. Her attorney tried to pull her away, but Kate shook her head. She needed to say something. "I don't regret what I did," she said, her voice carrying clearly. "I would do it again. Those passengers deserve to go home to their families. That was more important than following a rule. That's all I have to say." She got into the car Jennifer Washington had waiting and they drove away. Over the next 8 weeks, Kate's case became a national story. News shows debated it constantly. Conservative commentators said she should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, rules matter, and she'd broken them knowingly. Liberal commentators said she was a hero who should be pardoned. Military veterans were split, some said she'd betrayed the uniform, others said she'd honored it by saving lives. The trial began on a Monday morning in late spring. The courtroom was packed from day one. Prosecutor Margaret Richardson laid out the government's case methodically. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is simple. Major Kate Sullivan was dishonorably discharged from the United States Air Force. As a condition of that discharge, she was explicitly prohibited from operating any aircraft, military or civilian. She signed documents acknowledging these terms. She understood them clearly. And yet, on April 15 of this year, she operated a Boeing 737 commercial aircraft with 247 people on board. The law is clear. She broke it. Her motivations don't matter. Her intentions don't matter. The law is the law. We must find her guilty. Jennifer Washington gave the opening statement for the defense. Ladies and gentlemen, what would you have done? You're on an airplane. The captain has a stroke and dies. The first officer is too inexperienced to land in the storm. You have the skills to save everyone. But using those skills means breaking a law. Do you let 247 people die? Or do you break the law and save them? That's the choice Kate Sullivan faced. She chose to save lives. That's not a crime. That's heroism. The prosecution called witnesses first. FAA officials who testified about regulations. Military officers who testified about the importance of following discharge terms. Legal experts who explained the law. Then the defense called its witnesses. First Officer David Chin took the stand. Without Major Sullivan, everyone on that flight would be dead. I didn't have the skills to fly through that storm or land in zero visibility. She saved my life. She saved all of our lives. The businessman from seat 12D testified. His name was Robert Martinez, and he owned a construction company in Dallas. I called her a traitor. I was completely wrong. She's the bravest, most honorable person I've ever met. She knew she'd be arrested. She knew she'd face prison. And she did it anyway because it was the right thing to do. Patricia Chen, the nurse who tried to save Captain Rodriguez, testified. While Major Sullivan was landing that plane in conditions that would challenge any pilot, she was completely calm. She never showed fear. She gave instructions clearly. She gave all of us hope that we might survive. She's a hero. The trial went on for 3 weeks. Witness after witness. Passenger after passenger, all testifying that Kate had saved their lives. Then Jennifer Washington did something unexpected during the 3rd week of testimony. She called a witness named Marcus Webb. Webb was a retired intelligence analyst who'd worked in the Middle East during Kate's deployment there. Mr. Webb, Jennifer said, you were part of the intelligence team supporting Major Sullivan's squadron during her deployment, correct? Yes, ma'am. And you were involved in the analysis of the target that Major Sullivan was ordered to strike on November 17, 3 years ago? I was. Can you tell the jury about that target? Webb pulled out a folder of documents. The target was identified as an enemy combatant convoy in our initial briefing. However, our intelligence analysis showed something different. We had satellite imagery, signals intelligence, and human intelligence from local sources. All of it indicated that the convoy was actually civilian refugees fleeing a combat zone. Women, children, elderly people. Not combatants. The courtroom went completely silent. What did you do with this information? Jennifer asked. We reported it up the chain of command. Multiple times. We told them the target was civilian. And what was the response? We were ordered to strike anyway. Command said the intelligence was unreliable and that the convoy was a legitimate military target. Was the intelligence unreliable? No, ma'am. It was solid. Multiple independent sources all confirming the same information. That convoy was definitely civilian. So Major Sullivan was ordered to fire missiles at a convoy of women and children? Yes, ma'am. That's correct. And she refused? She did. She said she wouldn't commit a war crime. She went up the chain of command, filed official complaints, and finally testified to Congress about what she'd been ordered to do. "Do you have proof of this?" Webb held up the folder. "I kept copies of all the intelligence reports. I knew the military would cover this up eventually. So I kept the proof." He handed the documents to the judge. Judge Martinez reviewed them, and Kate watched the judge's face grow darker with each page she read. Prosecutor Richardson objected. "Your Honor, those documents are classified. They're evidence that Major Sullivan was dishonorably discharged for refusing to commit war crimes," Webb interrupted, his voice hard. "They're evidence that she was right and the military was wrong. They're evidence that she's being prosecuted for having a conscience." The jury heard it all. They saw the documents. They heard Webb testify about the cover-up. Then the defense called one more surprise witness. A journalist named Rachel Kim who'd been investigating military operations in the Middle East. "Ms. Kim," Jennifer said, "you've been investigating the specific operation that led to Major Sullivan's discharge, correct?" "Yes. For 2 years now." "What have you found?" "The convoy that Major Sullivan was ordered to strike was bombed 3 weeks later by another unit. All 63 people in the convoy were killed. Post-strike analysis confirmed they were all civilians. Women, children, elderly. No combatants at all. Major Sullivan was right. She was ordered to commit a massacre. She refused. She was punished for it." The courtroom erupted. Judge Martinez called for order, but the damage was done. The prosecution tried to argue that Kate's discharge was irrelevant to the current charges, but the jury had heard enough. They deliberated for 6 hours. 6 hours during which Kate sat in a holding cell and tried to prepare herself for prison. But when they came back, the forewoman stood and delivered the verdict clearly. "On the charge of violating federal discharge terms, we find the defendant not guilty." The courtroom exploded with applause and cheers. Judge Martinez didn't even try to stop it this time. Kate sat there, stunned. Not guilty. She wasn't going to prison. Judge Martinez waited for the noise to die down, then spoke directly to Kate. "Major Sullivan, this case should never have been brought before this court. You were placed in an impossible situation. You had to choose between following a rule and saving 247 lives. You made the only moral choice possible. You saved those lives. Anyone who tries to punish you for that is wrong. The charges against you are dismissed. You're free to go." She banged her gavel. Outside the courthouse, Kate was swarmed by media, supporters, passengers from the flight. Everyone wanted to talk to her, thank her, shake her hand. But she just wanted to go to her sister's grave. She'd missed the funeral while in custody. She needed to tell Sarah goodbye. She drove to the cemetery that evening. Found Sarah's grave with its new headstone. Sat down in the grass next to it. "Hey sis," Kate said softly. "I'm sorry I missed your funeral. I was in jail. Long story. But I want you to know something. I saved 247 people. I flew a commercial jet through the worst storm of my life and landed it safely. Everyone lived. And they finally admitted I was right about the convoy. I wasn't a traitor. I was trying to stop a war crime. You died thinking I was a disgrace, and I'm sorry you never knew the truth. But I know it now. And that's enough." Kate sat there until the sun went down, talking to her sister, telling her everything. 2 weeks later, Kate received an official letter from the Department of Defense. The investigation into the intelligence reports Marcus Webb had provided was complete. The original strike order had been determined to be illegal under the laws of armed conflict. The convoy had indeed been confirmed as civilian refugees. Kate's refusal to obey the order had been the correct decision. The Secretary of Defense issued a formal public apology. Kate's discharge was officially overturned and upgraded to honorable. All benefits were restored. Her pilot's license was reinstated. She was offered full reinstatement to active duty with a promotion to lieutenant colonel and a position as an instructor pilot at Nellis Air Force Base. Kate almost said no. The military had destroyed her reputation. They'd called her a traitor. They'd made her sister die thinking Kate was a disgrace. They'd cost her everything. Why would she go back? But then she thought about First Officer Chen, learning to fly through that storm. She thought about the passengers on Flight 1847, who'd called her a traitor and then thanked her for saving their lives. She thought about doing the right thing even when it costs everything. She accepted. 3 months later, Lieutenant Colonel Kate Sullivan was back in the cockpit of an F-16 Fighting Falcon at Nellis Air Force Base, Nevada. She was flying a routine training mission with 3 student pilots, teaching them advanced storm penetration techniques. Her radio crackled with an emergency call. All aircraft, civilian aircraft N-7421A reporting engine failure 20 miles northwest of Nellis. Single-engine Cessna, pilot and 3 passengers on board. Requesting emergency escort. The tower controller came back. Lieutenant Colonel Sullivan, you're closest to his position. Can you assist? Kate banked her F-16 toward the coordinates. Roger Tower, breaking formation to assist. As she approached the distressed aircraft, she saw it was struggling to maintain altitude. Black smoke trailed from the engine. The pilot sounded panicked on the radio. This is N-7421A, I'm losing power, I can't maintain altitude, I have my wife and 2 kids on board. N-7421A, this is F-16 callsign Viper 01, Kate said calmly. I'm on your left wing. Look out your window. A pause. I see you. Oh, thank God. You're going to be fine, Kate said with absolute confidence. I'm going to talk you through this. You're going to glide this aircraft down to Nellis. I'll guide you every step of the way. I can't do it. I'm not skilled enough. Yes, you can. You have the skills. You just need someone to help you through it. Now listen carefully. Maintain best glide speed, that's 65 knots for your aircraft. Kate talked the civilian pilot down, mile by mile, coaching him through every decision. She could see his hands shaking on the controls through his cockpit window. Could see his wife in the right seat, terrified, holding their children. The Cessna touched down on Nellis's main runway, rough but safe. Everyone walked away. After Kate landed her own aircraft, she taxied over to where the Cessna had been towed. The pilot, a man in his 30s, climbed out with his family and walked toward her F-16. Kate popped the canopy and climbed down. Are you Lieutenant Colonel Sullivan? The man asked. Kate Sullivan. Here it comes, Kate thought. The recognition. Yes. The man's eyes filled with tears. You were on Delta Flight 18475 5 months ago, weren't you? The one where the captain died? I was. My cousin was on that flight. You saved her life. She told me if I ever met you, I should say thank you. So thank you. And thank you for helping me today too. You've saved my family twice now. Kate felt her throat tighten. I'm just doing my job. No, the man said firmly. You're doing more than your job. You're doing what's right. Even when it costs you everything. You're an example of what we should all aspire to be. The man's wife stepped forward and hugged Kate. Thank you for bringing my husband and children home safely. Their 2 kids, maybe 6 and 8 years old, looked up at Kate with wide eyes. The 8-year-old said, Are you a hero? Kate knelt down to their level. No. I'm just a pilot who does what's right. Anyone can be a hero if they choose to do the right thing when it matters. Even when it's hard, the 6-year-old asked. Especially when it's hard, Kate said. The right thing is often the hardest thing. But it's still right. As Kate walked back to her F-16, she thought about everything that had happened. The discharge. The trial. The storm. The arrest. The vindication. Some people would always see her as the pilot who disobeyed orders. Some would see her as the hero who saved hundreds of lives. Some would see her as the whistleblower who exposed war crimes. But Kate didn't care what people saw anymore. She knew who she was. She was a pilot. She saved lives. She did what was right, even when it cost everything. As she climbed back into her F-16 and ran through the engine start checklist, Kate Sullivan smiled. The storm had passed. The landing had been rough. But everyone had survived. Her wingman's voice came over the radio. Viper 01, you ready for another training run? Roger that, Kate said. Let's fly. She pushed the throttle forward and the F-16 roared down the runway, climbing into the clear Nevada sky. Sometimes doing the right thing costs you everything. Your career. Your reputation. Your family's respect. Everything. But in the end, when you look at yourself in the mirror, you know you did what was right. And sometimes that knowledge is enough. Kate flew west toward the mountains, the sun setting behind them, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. She'd lost her sister. She'd lost her career for a while. She'd lost her reputation. But she'd gained something more valuable. She'd gained the knowledge that when the moment came, when everything was on the line, she'd chosen correctly. She'd saved lives instead of taking them. She'd stood up for what was right instead of following illegal orders. And in the end, that was all that really mattered. The radio crackled again. Viper 01, Tower. We have another civilian pilot requesting assistance. Are you available? Kate smiled. Always. Send me the coordinates. Because that's what she did. She saved people. She did the right thing. Even when it cost everything. And she'd keep doing it for as long as she could fly.